Where are you at these days? Where are you at these days?
Oh.
Are you still down in,
No, I'm just back. I just got back to Colorado like 3
cool.
weeks ago. Yeah, I made it back in some ways. Just 3-4 weeks ago. Yeah, so I'm now in Boulder again.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
How does it feel?
It's a bit weird to be back. I'm still adjusting a little bit. It's just, yeah. But I mean, yeah, that's kind of
It's
normal.
not quite the same place that you left, is it?
No, not quite. It's quite the opposite. So, yeah, but yeah, we'll see. Oh, Leo just sent me a WhatsApp. Yeah, Leo has bad internet. Very bad internet. Ooh, okay. I did kind of started live streaming just in case people are gonna go there, you know,
Okay.
out there. Which I actually think someone is actually on there.
Okay.
Seems. I'm entirely sure. Oh no, that might be me. Okay. And I will just start recording to my computer.
Yeah, okay, so I'm starting.
I mean, you can start when you want, but yes, I'm recording.
I'll start at 6:07, so we're good.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. Hello, friends. I am here tree camping in Oakland, California, and there's a reason they call it Oakland. This is prime oak territory. The main species is our coast live oak. Here is a branch, coast live oak. They are, of course, evergreen, and they have these cupped leaves with little teeth on them and little tuft on the underside of the leaves by the veins. That's a coast live oak. So this area is oak habitat, and it is also redwood habitat. So I will talk a little bit about both species today, and I have a nice little camping thing going here. If you can see behind me, people have their hammocks. They're setting up. Over here, we have James set up in the tree. And I will start screen sharing.
I'm gonna make it a host, co-host. One moment. I'm gonna find you. Make co-host. Yes.
Okay, we are in business. East Bay trees. So this is the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area. On the other side of the bay is San Francisco and the Golden Gate. This picture here is a iconic California place with California trees. Two species, Monterey cypress and Monterey pines. And this is a very limited area, the only place where they are native together in their native environment. But both of those species have been planted around the world, many places, both as ornamental. For Monterey pine, they've been planted as lumber trees, especially in New Zealand and Australia. I'm going to do the hit. I think that works better.
Yeah, might be the case.
Yeah. Okay, so I am Eric Folmer, and here are some arborist credentials. I've been working with arboriculture here in the East Bay area for over 40 years. And my business name and tree name is Tree Wolf. And you know, now I don't really do the tree work much anymore. I do some teaching, consulting, and I also do canopy and wildlife research and put my climbing skills to use that way. So before international travel shut down, I had some interesting projects around the world. I worked in Peru on some canopy research. I worked in Madagascar. I'm supposed to go back there in January if I can. As soon as travel is fine, we'll go back there. And I went to Michigan to work with bald eagle research. So these are the things that really turn me on these days. But this is all about the Big Canopy Campout and the Sarah Foundation. So the Sarah Foundation is supporting indigenous people to protect the Amazon forest in Ecuador. So please donate and support them. Now let's talk about California. California is a great place for trees. It has a very diverse environment and many kinds of trees. So when we look at the map, the coast redwoods follow the coast, and they need a lot of moisture. And up here is a lot of rain. And as you get inland, it's too hot for them. As you get down here, it gets hotter and hotter. As they get further down, there's less rain. Here's a little red dot, coast redwood distribution. That's where we are right now, Oakland. So right above this site, there is something called Redwood Regional Park, which is a big valley full of redwoods. And below us, there's an area called Deona Canyon, also all redwood. So in this area, the rain is not as much. So you look at let me go back, sorry. So Prairie Creek, when you go up north, you have up to 100 inches of rain per year, where the really big trees are. But Oakland also had some big trees before they were cut down. We have an average of 24 inches of rain, but we have fog, and the redwoods will soak up the moisture from the fog directly in these little pockets of valleys where the fog will hang for a long time. So that's why we have these areas. But most of Oakland is oak habitat. So California has 10 species of oaks. The majority of them are endemic to California, or their range goes a little bit outside of the state, barely into Oregon, Arizona, or down into Mexico to Baja California. And then we have 9 species of what we call chaparral oaks. These are scrub oaks, much smaller. And this map tells you the different vegetation types in the state. And they're broken up into 19 different types. Out of those 19, 11 have oaks as a dominant species or an associate. So this is all oak territory here. And the only areas that do not have oaks are like the very high mountains, the alpine forest, and the desert down here where it's just too dry. And here in East Bay, where we are right now, this is the territory. And these are the type where this map, this is right by the bay, coastal marsh and prairie. Then we have oak woodland. Going further inland, where it's drier and hotter, we have oak savanna and grasslands, very open. This doesn't even put the redwood forest on the map, but they are in Alameda County right up here where we are. And so this is back in 1869, Madison and H Street. You know, big oaks, open forest, oak woodlands. And this is downtown Oakland. It does not look like that anymore. It is very close to the bay. So actually, when you look at this map, the coastal marsh and prairie is not really that wide. The oaks used to go pretty close to the bay. This was all oaks. So California has some bragging rights when it comes to trees. We have the tallest tree in the world, coast redwood. We have the biggest in volume, the giant sequoia. We have the oldest, the bristlecone pine. We have 10 native cypresses. It's more than any country in the world. We have 13 native pines, and that is more than any other country in the world except one. So any guesses what it is? The one that has the most. I'm going to tell you, it's Mexico.
Ah, I did not know that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have even guessed that, I guess.
Most people don't. Most people think you know, native pines. They think Canada or Russia,
Yeah,
some more
something like
temperate.
that. I was thinking
more-
about Europe, maybe somewhere.
Right, right. It's well, in Mexico, it's the mountains, mountains
Right,
in Mexico.
right.
And when we come to oaks, so we have 10 native tree oaks, and 7 of those are native to right here in the East Bay. Now,
Mm,
again, Mexico is number one. Mexico has 160 native oaks, and China has 100. So you know, a lot of oak species. And a friend of mine is studying Mexican oaks and also Arizona oaks because he's looking at what oaks are more adapted to hot weather and more drought resistance. So which one can he bring into the nursery trade and sell here, looking at climate change and it's get hotter.
right.
So we got one more bragging right. We have the most diverse urban forest in the world, which is Los Angeles. The Los Angeles basin, you have a huge diversity of trees. We have trees from all over the world. And so if you were to guess which country are the most of the introduced trees from, if you said Australia, you would be right. Australian trees are very suited to the California climate. Now, we also have the longest pine cones and the biggest pine cones. Now, the longest is the sugar pine. The biggest is the colder pine. Sugar pine native to the mountains. A colder pine native to the coastal hills. So there are some close to here that are native. Then we also have a pine called the gray pine. And there is one which you can see in the picture here. Well, is that it? There it is. No. Anyway, I got a little problem with getting this angle right, but it's in the background here. It's a multi-trunk, and that has cones that are almost as big as the colder pines. So these are the trees I'm going to talk about. Is the main species of redwoods, our coast live oak, and the digger pine or coast. I mean, gray pine is just mentioning it because I'm right next to one right here. It's kind of a very open light pine, but usually has multiple trunks. So California oaks are a rich resource for a lot of reasons, for people and wildlife, and they're a very iconic part of the landscape. So here is someone that was looking at the California oaks and inspired in 1875 to make an oil painting. And this is typical view of the inland of the big valley. You have, you know, grassland, savanna, and oak trees. Now, what is an oak? So an oak has these characteristics. It has acorns with scales. It has male catkins, meaning it is wind pollinated. It has small female flowers on the same tree as the male catkins, but they are separated in space and times when they're active, so it doesn't cross pollinate. So other trees that are in the same family are not oaks. For example, the tan oaks, which we also have, are not oaks because they are insect pollinated. Chestnuts are in the same family. They are not oaks because they don't have acorns. They have a husk around the seed. So there are about 500 species of oaks in the world, and they are in this band around the world, mostly in the northern hemisphere. There's a few that goes into the southern hemisphere in Borneo and Sumatra. And in this region here, all ancient cultures have used oak and have eaten acorns and used the wood. And then there are Costa Rican oaks. The biggest oaks in the Americas are down in Costa Rica, going down as far south as Colombia. So on our tours and travels to Costa Rica, we climb some of these big oaks. They do not look anything like our oaks. They have big buttress roots. And this is in a cloud forest at 8,000 feet elevation. There's a lot of moisture, and when you get up in the canopy, there's a lot of mosses, there's bromeliads, orchids, beautiful birds. And here is another Costa Rican oaks similar to these. They have huge acorns. So I just,
Eric,
yes.
like if the acorns are that huge, like what is eating those acorns?
What is he?
Like a giant squirrel or like what
Oh,
is that?
yeah, a regular sized squirrel. It just takes its time and then chews away on it for days. But
Okay.
the squirrels love it. Uh,
Quite
and
amazing.
I want to compare to the oaks on the East Coast. See the white oak on the East Coast has a huge range. This is the big East Coast forest. You know, before the development, you know, the saying was a squirrel, talking about squirrels, could go from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Mississippi River without touching the ground. This was one big forest of mixed species. White oak was the dominant species, and a lot of chestnuts and also pines. Then we have the southern live oak that is very coastal. It's in Florida. It goes up to Virginia. The botanical name is Quercus virginiana. Then it goes over into here to Louisiana and Texas. And these are evergreen spreading oaks. A lot of times they will have Spanish moss growing on them. And the rendezvous we have planned for next April is in northern Florida, north central Florida, on a site where are lots of these oaks. So they are excellent climbing trees. They have spreading canopy with strong branches. So the oak has a very important cultural history and symbolism in all cultures with oak trees. This is the Druids worship the oak as a god, and the wood has been used for many things. Of course, wine barrels, Viking ships, later sailing ships. You know, the British Navy was all about the oaks, and people have been eating the acorn. So in ancient Rome, in Mesopotamia, acorn was a common food. This is from California, fairly recent. People, the native Californians made these big baskets to store the acorn. And here and there in the landscape, you will see these grinding holes where people would use stones and they will grind the acorns into a mush. Then they would typically leeches to get some of the tannins out and then make bread and meals from it. So there's also people that eat acorns these days. So it's popular in Korea. Here is some acorn powder in Korea and some Korean acorn cake. And here is something in Greece from Greek oaks where they use the acorn. So the native oaks we have right here in the East Bay, these are in the red, white, and golden oak groups. So the red oaks are the coast live oak, black oak, interior live oak. The white oaks are valley oak, blue oak, and Oregon oak. Golden oaks are canyon live oak. So the most dominant and most important are coast live oak, valley oak, and blue oak. And the other ones have sort of isolated population mixed in here and there. And these, the three I mentioned, dominate their environment. So the coast live oak is where we are right now, and they tend to grow sort of quasi-riparian on the eastern slope, southern slope of hills, where it gets not quite as hot, and then they're interspersed with open country with grassland. The grassland used to be native bunch grasses. Now they're mostly been replaced by European invasive grasses because they've been introduced and outcompeted the native ones. So the valley oak is a deciduous. It's the biggest oak we have. And going further inland, they are the dominant species of the savanna. So the big valley in California is mostly agriculture now. The first outsiders that visited California and saw it, they described it as a beautiful parkland, you know, trees in open country with lots of grass and wildflowers, just like a park. Then we have blue oak. Blue oaks are a little bit smaller than the valley oaks, so they are more drought resistant. So they grow higher on the ridges, and you know the blue color is kind of like a waxy covering on the leaves that helps them conserve moisture. And there is a lot of beautiful blue oak woodlands. This is probably the most widespread dominant type of oak woodlands. So the coast live oak, I just showed you a leaf, and they got this cupped leaf with the teeth. And this is the range. Follow the coast, coastal hills, a few isolated populations down in Mexico, and that's it. The valley oak, the whole valley, up and down the coast ranges, not in the mountains. They have leaves with big lobes, pointed acorns. The blue oaks, say they sort of surround the valley, and they're in the hills, a little bit higher ground. The leaves have smaller lobes and a bluish color. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about sizes. Like basically, the biggest oak we have is the valley oak, and these are the way the system has a point system for creating champions. You take the circumference in inches plus the height in feet plus 1/4 of the average crown spread. That gives you the total points. So looking for which is the largest champion of our local oaks. It is not a valley oak, it is a canyon oak, canyon live oak. Well, that is because when you have a double trunk like this, you measure the circumference below, and you have a huge circumference, so it's weighed that way. But other than that, second biggest champion is valley oaks, and then further down, blue oak, the smallest champion. And so oak species evolved with fire. There was natural fire from lightning strikes. There was man-made fire. The native Californians, they would periodically start fires, and the man is in the forest that way. So they would do like a mosaic. They would burn one area one year, another area the next year. And these are low intensity fires that does not harm the oaks. The oaks have a thick bark, and as long as it doesn't get too hot. So the problem is when you suppress fires for a long time, then you get a buildup of fuel. The fires get so hot that they will kill the trees. And the settlers also had a habit of burning woodlands to manage them for the grazing and stuff, until fairly recent, until about 1950. Then it went out of fashion. So when you look at the tree rings, you can tell what years there were big fires. You can see the fire scars going back, and you can, check the history like that. Last year we had the worst year for fires ever, and so far year to date is even more this year. So now we're coming into the major part of the fire season. This is close to here in eastern Alameda County, 390 acres burned, mostly oak woodland. And here's a picture of we had the Oakland Hills firestorm in 1991, and this is what it looked like afterwards. And I was in the middle of that fire. I was working on the cleanup for about 1.5 years, cutting down burned trees. And what you had was chimneys. Other than that, everything, the houses were gone. A lot of trees were still standing, but they were charred. Some of them were killed. Some of them were sprouting back. And this is typically how an oak tree will sprout back from fire. If the fire got real hot, it'll come back from the stump only. If the fire was medium hot, it'll still be able to come back from the trunk. Here's a hillside by a lake in Oakland where I planted acorns, and everything burned there. And there was a lot of non-native species. There were pines and eucalyptus. After the fire, I planted acorns and just put them in the ground. I collected them locally on the other side of the lake where the oaks were fine. Going back there later, 25 years later, you have a nice oak forest. So this is the best way to plant trees if you have the time frame. They will develop a natural good root system. You don't have to worry about that. You don't get circling roots and kinked roots. You get the roots. They're going to go wherever they can. They're going to find the moisture.
Hey, Eric, can you change the angle of your camera and position a little bit or not? So we
Say it
see your
again?
face. So we can see your face a little bit better or not?
Oh,
Yeah.
I see my face. Okay, all
Yeah,
right.
now it's a little bit better. Yeah. Because you're like looking at
Oh
your.
yeah, I had that minimized. Okay,
Oh yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and I got this the sun in my eyes here. So
Ah,
anyway,
yeah.
there we
Okay.
are. Yeah, okay. Now I can see.
So yeah, now it's much better, the camera. So do you need to, was this like a project in the county, or did you just decide to do this yourself? Is that
I was working as a park ranger
okay.
as a seasonal job in between doing my tree work, and there was my territory, that lake and the surrounding area, and it's kind of like I did this on my own because I was like the late ranger. My shift was ended at 7, and everybody else went home at 4 o'clock, and I was there by myself, and it was quiet. So I would go up in the hills, stick acorns in the ground. When I had extra time, I would carry water up and give him a drink of water. And that was only the first season, and that was not very consistent. That was all from the first season. I wasn't there anymore. They took off on their own.
Okay. Interesting. Cool.
Okay. Now, once in a while the arrows won't work. I have to do this to move ahead. Okay. All right. California's changing landscape. So San Francisco Presidio was built in 1776. There was the first settler building in this area built by the Spaniards as a military military thing right at the golden entrance of the Golden Gate to control the entrance to the bay. And at that time, the first people that visited California, they talked about the huge herds of elk everywhere, and it was so easy to find elk and kill them and eat them. But now, within a few decades, they were hunted almost to extinction, and cows were introduced. And the economy of California during Spanish and Mexican California was all about cows. They would sell hides, and the ships would come from the East Coast, go around the Horn, and they would go up and down the coast, and they would trade and get hides. And then as the cows came in, maybe they came in from Spain, they would have seeds from European grasses in their fur, and those seeds would sprout, and they would outcompete the native species. The natives were like bunch grasses, the perennial, and the European grasses were annuals, but more aggressive and deeper roots, so they would dominate. That changed the whole landscape. So there's some controversy about that because the environment evolved with grazing animals, with the elk. And the question is, are the cows doing the same, or the cows another thing? So good things about having the cows is they control the fuel and they remove the fats that will cover the soil, but also they compact the soil, pollute the streams. They eat the seedling trees, so we don't have the regeneration of young trees that we should have. But it was all about ranching, and the state used to pay people to even dynamite the big valley oaks just to get more grazing territory.
Wow.
So this is just within a few hundred years they've changed, and you've had the grazing in the oak woodlands, and it has changed it a lot. But when you look to what's going on in Spain and Portugal, which is very similar climate, Mediterranean climate, with the long dry summers and the mild wet winters, they have thousands of years of history where they have grazing, and they manage the woodlands for other products. They would have, for example, here, cork oak, you remove the cork, the tree is still alive. You can, every 8-9 years, you can take the cork and then you can let it recover. And they would have, not just beef, but milk, honey, firewood, mushrooms. And these areas are now being depopulated. There's not a lot of money. People are moving to the cities. So now they are focusing more of creating habitat, maybe have some income from hunting and from tourism. Grazing is a big controversial issue. And it's just an example, like Tule elk is a native California elk, almost hunted to extinction. There's a small herd in the north of San Francisco, a place called the Point Reyes Peninsula. And in the same peninsula, there are ranchers running cows. And when this was created as a national recreation area, they made agreements with the ranchers that had the cows there that they could have them there for 20 years or 25 or 30 years, and those leases are up. So basically, the cows should have been removed, and this area should have been given to the elk. But the Park Service has limited the elk. They start shooting the elk, and they want the rangers to stay. So we are trying to. Some people are trying to protest that. So some people call it welfare ranching because the ranching fees that the rangers pay are very low to run the cattle, and there's a whole philosophy of the cowboys that think that they have a right to the land. They think the federal government has no right over land, and that culminated in the Bundy family standoff, 2014, this family of the Bundys, they've been running cows on Bureau of Land Management land for many years, and they never paid feed. They never paid their fees, even though they owe lots and lots. And they say, oh, the federal government has no right. So finally, the federal government came in and they took some of their cows and they said, well, we're going to collect. And then all these heavily armed cowboys and MAGA people, protested, and the feds backed off, and they let them do what they want to do. They were afraid to confront them. And I have a personal story where I kind of, back in 2002, I was out in that area. I was in a little town called Pios, Nevada, which is close to that. As far out there, the distances are big, the sagebrush country. And I was out in the sagebrush. I found a big animal that had been killed and butchered. I found the hide and the blood and some innards and stuff. And there were beer cans and tire tracks. So I didn't know what I was looking at. I thought this is a cow. Somebody was rustling cow. So I went into this little town and I told the people, I said, hey, somebody is rustling your cows out here. And I can tell you exactly where it is because I marked it, a waypoint on my GPS. And they were acting kind of weird. They weren't happy to hear that. And I couldn't figure it out. And I was in this bar called the Overland Saloon, and I was in there talking to people. And they're like wearing camouflage clothes, and hunting knives and the belts and stuff. Finally, it registered in my mind that was not a cow. That was them killing and butchering and poaching the elk that were released by the government. And then I realized they were getting kind of hostile, and I had to. I pretended that I was going to the bathroom. I left the drink. I wasn't started. And I just slipped out the back door and left. And then I saw a big sign saying, federal government issues $1,000 reward in return poachers. So they probably thought I was after the reward. That's a big issue, and that's called the now those people, when Trump was doing his MAGA thing, then they all joined him. Anyway, this was a conflict. The Battle of Bunkerville, then they occupied this wildlife refuge in Oregon with all their rhetoric. But hey, that's all politics. The native grazers' original range. This is the buffalo. This was the buffalo range. They weren't in California, just tiny little bit. But this was elk range. This was all elk. They are mostly gone right now. Now it's all cattle. Anyway, the valley oak, which are inland from here, the big oaks, they have a certain pattern that the native Californians, made a point of. They would never camp or put their tent underneath a valley oak because these big heavy branches on a hot summer day, all of a sudden they break. This is called summer limb drop. It happens with other species too, but this species is known for this pattern. And you look at it, there's no decay, there's no cracks. It's just like the wood gets dry and the water collects in the end, it gets heavier. So here's an example of when you get a long horizontal limb like this one, you want to either reduce it or whatever, either remove it back to a lateral point or reduce it to reduce the risk of failure. This was a paddock small paddock where a bunch of valuable horses you'd gather in the shade, so we don't want to hit them. So here, I'm have a little action shot here, and if any of my students happen to be watching this, just remember, always wear a helmet, never use a chainsaw one-handed.
Oh, is that a rule? Is
That's
that
a
a
rule.
rule? Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
an arborist, right? So why is that?
Well, a chainsaw will kick back.
Okay.
But the secret thing is, this is a top handle chainsaw. This is a steel 020. They are designed to be used one-handed because they are balanced to one-hand use. But they come with a manual that say never use one hand.
Okay.
So that's just way that goes.
Okay. Interesting.
So I want to mention English oaks here. Here is the English oaks. This is known as the Robin Hood tree. Supposedly he gathered there with his merry men. And this oak is an old oak, and it has been lined back and sending out new shoots. So you have a massive trunk and a reduced. And there's a saying: oak grows for 200 years, 200 years, and declines for 200 years. So it grows fast, it reaches its full size, and then it starts as the vitality goes down, it'll withdraw, and these branches will break off. And I find these trees beautiful, and many places in England, they will preserve these trees. You'll be in a field, and if they're out in the field, they're fine. They can do what they do. If they're in a city where there's chalk, you want to do this with pruning. You want to reduce the risk, so you actually create this type of retrenchment, pulling it back. And our guru in arboriculture, Alex Shaiko, it's a man that I admire greatly. A lot of studies and how to treat them. So the only point I ever would disagree with him was he went to England one time and he looked at all these trees, and he's kind of opinionated and sometimes rubs people the wrong way. So he told the British arborists, "Oh, these are just in decline. They're decaying. You should just cut them down. You should let them die with dignity," was his saying. Well, that's kind of because he has a background in forestry, and that's a forestry thinking that came into it. Like, oh, it's a decaying, but actually, it's beautiful. It's habitat, and that's a natural life cycle.
Right. Yeah.
So this is a map. This is before the gold rush during Mexican California. This is El Rancho de San Antonio. That is what is now Oakland. And we are right here, right now. So this here was called public domain. It was called Los Palos Colorados, which were the redwoods. This is the Redwood Valley here. And this was these huge ranches were granted by the Mexican government to certain families. So this was the Peralta family, and over here were the Moraga families. They made an agreement to not cut these trees. They said, this is public domain and we won't mess with it. And then, you had the gold rush, and you had the Americans and the Europeans coming in, and they saw these big trees, and they saw, of course, dollar signs, and they started cutting them. And the local people chased them out of the forest for a few years, but then there were just so many newcomers that they took over, and they came in and they cut every single tree at least twice. A lot of these areas were cut 3 times. Now the second growth is big. You have big trees, but you don't have any old. You have only one tree that is still survived that whole onslaught. It's a tree that was kind of small, and it's the only one that we have that's older than from the 1850s. So we are at the edge of the redwood here, and there are some redwoods down below us here, and then we are in oak. Other than that, this is all oak woodlands. So here is a British sea captain that came to the Bay Area in 1827, Mexican California, and he made this drawing of the view. And these are the what do you call the Palos Colorados? These are the redwoods on the hill. And he figured out that there was a big rock called Blossom Rock in the bay that when you came into the Golden Gate, and by sighting two big trees on the hill, you could set a course so you would not hit that rock.
Mm.
And those trees were known as the navigation trees. And they were both cut down, but the stump of one of them was there for many, many decades. People measured it. It was 34 feet across. And they don't have they don't know the exact height, but they know it was big. They know coming towards the Golden Gate from the ocean, you could see it. And this is more likely one of the biggest trees anywhere ever, bigger than any, more massive than any giant sequoias.
Right. I mean, 34 feet is like 10 meters. That's
Right.
like, that's crazy.
It's huge.
Yeah, that's really
And
crazy.
this is the entrance. This is Golden Gate is over here. So this is the entrance to San Francisco Bay. It's the Alcatraz Island here. And this is where the rock was.
Mm.
So they would use those trees. Later they dynamited
Ah,
the rock to remove that hazard to navigation. And they said the whole city came out to watch it. There was a big explosion, lots of dynamite. And this is actually a photograph. Somebody made an oil painting of the event. So no more Blossom Rock, no more Blossom Rock trees.
wow.
There's a marker on the site, the Blossom Rock navigation trees. It's very close to where we are right in here. And this is up in Roberts Regional Park. And now there's a ring of trees.
Right.
So down below us here, there is the old survivor redwoods. And this is estimated to be 425 years old in 1981. So that's this one here. It sticks up. It's kind of scrawny. And I climbed it and measured it one time. It's 117 feet, or it was. It might have gained a little bit since a couple years ago.
Mm.
Here I am in the top, so it's close to the homes in Oakland Hills. This is all developed, but it's a few people know about it. It's just sitting there by itself. But nice view of San Francisco from there.
Yeah.
And just an example of this tree, I took a picture of the foliage at the top and the foliage at the bottom. So that shows that this is called sun foliage. When it's exposed directly to the sun and the wind, it will become these scale-like sharp leaves, and then it's a wide, more feather-like leaves further down in the shade. Okay, so the logging went crazy starting in the 1850s, up and down redwood, natural range. People cut like crazy. They used the lumber to, build San Francisco. And then after the big earthquake in San Francisco, 1906, they need a lot more lumber to rebuild it. But actually, in the very beginning, a lot of the lumber was shipped to Hawaii because it is very rot resistant and insect resistant. So in the tropical climate of Hawaii, by then the Hawaiian kingdom wanted to build the big palaces and buildings, and they used the redwood for that. And then they had these long trains of oxes pulling the logs. This is Muir Woods, Muir National Monument. So this is the only major site in the Bay Area where the trees were never cut. This was saved and preserved as a national park. This is a fairly near the ocean, but it's also a valley where the fog hangs in there, where the trees have the right conditions. And this is when people come to visit San Francisco, this is the closest place where they can go see the big redwoods. So it gets kind of crowded in the summer. And I used to take visitors there, but then it gets too crowded. But now there's another park, Henry Cowell State Park, that has big trees a little bit further away from here that I always take visitors. And here is the Redwoods, Redwood Rendezvous 2019. Here's a group by a big tree. And here is what we call the Reynolds tree, which is near our site there. And this is like 110 feet up, and there's this big dog leg of a secondary top. So these old trees, they have a very complicated structure. It's not just one trunk going up with side branches like the second growth is. So the redwoods, they like the moisture, and they get the water directly from the leaves. There was it was debated. There were people who were trying to determine, is it because the fog drips down and it's taken up by the roots, or does it goes directly into the leaf? Well, there's one guy from UC Berkeley. He studied that, and you can mark water with isotopes, so you know this is the same water, and you can see, you know, it's actually absorbed by the needles. And he estimated that 30 to 40% of the water is from the fog. It depends a lot on where you are. The further south, the more important the fog is. A fire is also important. Redwood are fairly fire resistant, and even when if the fire gets so hot, it'll break through and create a cavity. There's so much moisture, the bark is so thick that that tree can live for a long time being hollow like that. So the fire is kind of a limiting factor for where the redwood is more competitive. Well, would you could go up further north into Oregon, then some other trees like hemlocks or Doug fir are more competitive because fire is not a factor. You know, they would get killed by the fire, and that's why the sort of the original range of redwood stops right there. But even though if you plant a redwood further north in Oregon, Washington State, British Columbia, it'll do just fine. Oakland Hills Fire 1991, I already talked about that. I worked on cleaning up, cutting down burnt trees for the insurance company, and a lot of times the insurance company or the homeowners would want to cut these trees down because the branches are burned and it's charred. But we would tell them, no, it's coming back. That's what they do. And we would talk them into leaving it, and sure enough, they come back. That was Oakland Hills Fire. It was crazy. This is above a hotel near here, the Claremont Hotel. 3,000 homes burned, and it was out of control. There was absolutely nobody able to stop it. It was just because it cooled down and the weather changed that it slowed down. And here's another example of a fire, the Tubbs Fire, which was up in Sonoma. So, you know, a lot of times when you have a fire like that, people would blame it on the trees and say, well, it's the trees, because all the trees that burns fast. Well, actually, this is a typical view of that. The houses are gone, the trees are still there. It's typical the fire will spot from house to house, especially if they have a wooden roof, dry shingles, dry shakes. And then the houses burn so hot that they will kill or catch the trees on fire. This was last year. Big Basin Park it was burned, and it expected to recover. It's still close to the public, but because it just, you know, risk and assets, but the trees, most of them will cover, even though it got very hot. Okay, of course, redwoods are known for their heights. The Hyperion is the tallest known tree in the world, 380 feet. Here it compared to some landmarks. But there were trees, redwoods and other species that were taller in the past before the frenzy of cutting it down to make money. And here are some well documented. Some might have been tall tales, but these are well documented. 435 feet mountain ash, Eucalyptus regnans, was documented. It was measured after it had fallen. 425 feet redwood felled in Mendocino County by the Eagle River. This is where our rendezvous was in 2019. 410-foot Douglas fir in British Columbia felled. So yeah, there was some monsters everywhere, but it's just human greed, you know, time to make money. And interesting enough, the seven tallest trees in England are all trees that are from right here, from Northern California and further north in the Pacific. So this guy, David Douglas, he was a botanist, and he explored the American West Coast, 1824 to 34, and he shipped seeds back to England. And now the tallest tree in England is a Douglas fir, 31 meters. Second is a giant sequoia, 59 meters. So, and all down, these are all local trees here in Northern California. And the seeds were spread from there, and in Denmark, also in Holland, where Greta is from. These are the trees that are grown in tree farms for as a
Right.
lumber tree.
Plantations.
Right. And
Yeah.
here, so I grew up in Denmark and I climbed these trees because I didn't know at the time, but these were most of the tall trees that I climbed were like Douglas fir and Sitka spruce. And here is a picture where I climbed a tall tree next to my Boy Scout camp.
Ooh. Were your leaders happy with that?
Oh, no problem. No. Back in the day, that was
No
fine.
problem. Right.
This was before all the liability issues. This was
Right.
natural part of growing up.
Mm.
So the AIDS, this is our trip in 2019 with the tree climbers at Henry Cowell, looking at the rings on a big slice of redwood. So the coast redwoods are up to 200, 2,200 years, which is old, but not the oldest. The bristlecone pines, which are amazing pines in the high mountains, the White Mountains in far eastern California, 11,000 feet, 12,000 feet, up to 5,000 years old. They grow very slowly. They have a short growing season, but they make it forever. Old growth forest, we talk about that. The old growth forest is very different from second growth, even though second growth redwood can get very big. Like most of our second growth is maybe 150 years old and you have huge trees, but it's different. It takes a little bit longer to get those multiple layer and the structure of old growth. Here's an old growth with a complex structure, or another big one, old growth I climb. So some species depend on the old growth. This bird here is called the marbled murrelet. It was known as an ocean-going bird, and people would see it from their ships miles out in the ocean. They never knew where it actually nested until a tree climber in the Santa Cruz Mountains found a nest on a branch.
Wow.
They realized, oh, they nest on old growth trees. They need a big wide branch to be able to build a nest. And a second growth redwood will not have a branch big enough, so it's not going to work for them, or Douglas fir.
Right.
Another species is a spotted owl. It needs those trees that are old enough to have cavities in it. It is a cavity nesting bird. Second growth typically do not develop the cavities. And this is so this became important because of the politics and the Endangered Species Act. This is spotted owl habitat, the old growth, and that's why we need to preserve it.
Mm-hmm.
Rainbow trout is a fish that was described right up to the hill here, Redwood Regional Park, and it's coming back in the stream. So that's nice to see. Wandering salamander, this was described by Steve Shillett in the Redwood Canopy up north. And this salamander is, it needs moisture to thrive, but there's enough moisture year round. It can live this whole life in a canopy without going to the ground. And this is an example of Steve Shillett doing a lot of research in the last few decades, learning what's going on in the Redwood Canopy. Also, a little story here, a moon tree. Somebody shipped some redwood seeds to the moon in 1974, and they came back to the earth. And the idea was, we're going to see if they grow any differently. So they grew some seedling. One of them was planted here in the Berkeley Hills. It is now about 120 feet tall. And the people that work on the site, they noticed it had a dual top. So when you get that with the same size tops, then you get bark inclusion here. That is a weak point, and each top is one-sided. The branches will go out for the light. So what typical happens with a tree like that during a big storm, one top will break out. Then you end up with a big wound and you end up with a one-sided top. So it's better to mitigate that while it's small. So they asked me to climb it and take care of it. So I went up there and I removed. So you look at it, which one is better, which one is more balanced, and you make the best cut you can and remove one of them. So this is a little bit of a tricky climb because your branches are weak, but you just gotta climb so your weight goes into the trunk.
Right. So you climbed the moon tree.
The moon tree, that's
So
right. Yeah,
you went to the moon, basically.
pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
some way.
I know. So
Kind of crazy. I didn't know they did that. What a crazy idea. But
right.
yeah,
No, it's funny, but and there's a few of them around, but they
yeah,
didn't grow any differently. But it's like, well, it's a little anecdote,
right.
and now we know. Now we know that they can go out in a weightless space and come back and just be
And
the
it's still
same,
the same. Yeah.
right? You know, so that's how science works, right? You don't always have a concrete result that you can use for make money on, but you expand knowledge.
Right. That's true. That is absolutely true.
So yeah, this is the cut I made. You can see I removed the one that has the least wood, and I made it. And then this is a few years ago. So now it's one sided. It developed new branches. That side looks pretty good. So I'll just mention briefly some species that are related to the coast redwood. Giant sequoia, of course, is one. In California also. Dawn redwood from China, bald cypress from the American South, Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, Montezuma cypress from Mexico. This used to be all considered one plant family, Taxadeaceae, but now they were moved into Cupressaceae. So when you look at the coast range here is the redwoods, and they have a fairly wide range compared to the giant sequoia. The giant sequoia are like isolated groves in the mid elevation of the Sierra Mountains. So they are more vulnerable. And right now, there are some big fires near them. Last year, some of them were killed by fires, just got too hot, the fires, and now they're in danger again. And this is the biggest tree in the world, not this one, is that it? No, the General Sherman. And they are in this range here. So now there's a fire near it, and they're really worried about it. It's most of them are south of Yosemite. There's a couple of groves in Yosemite, and there's a few north of there. There it is, Gentleman Sherman. This is the numbers of it, the biggest bole volume of any known tree. Yeah, this was a little anecdote about the cultural history. There was some kind of commune that moved up there a long time ago, and they named this the Karl Marx tree. And it was known as the Karl Marx tree. Well, then I guess when the federal government took over, it was too radical for them, so they changed the name
Right.
to General Sherman.
Still not a super pretty name, but
Right.
okay.
Yeah. And this is how the needles look. They're like so-called awl shaped. They're short and pointed, and they have these beautiful cones.
Yeah.
Okay, so luckily, at least Save the Redwoods League has saved a lot of redwoods where there's maybe 5% of old growth left, and because the redwoods come back from the stump, the ones that were clear cut have come back, and they are big second growth now. Julia Butterfly Hill, she is a young idealistic woman who spent 2 years living in a redwood tree to save it. The tree is known as Luna, and it was saved. And the Pacific Lumber that owned the property, they agreed to preserve that tree and create a buffer around it called the Sanctuary Forest. And now Stuart Moskowitz is the caretaker of that tree and that forest, and he came to our rendezvous in the redwoods and talked about it, gave a very nice talk, as this is inspiring. Okay, so that's what I got, and we are out of time almost, but we're going to leave this open for people to weigh in. And I just want to remind you, this is all to support the Sarah Foundation of Indigenous People in Ecuador. So as you can, give a little contribution to help them out.
Nice. Thank you, Eric.
All right.
Can you remind me what happened to Luna? Why they had to put those metal plates in there in the tree?
Yeah, somebody vandalized it. Somebody went in with a big chainsaw and made a big cut partially through the trunk, and then it was moving so much in the wind that and the chainsaw cut was opening and closing, and they were afraid it's going to fall.
Right.
And my friend Dennis Inikas, who is a consulting arborist, he went up there and looked at it with the local caretakers, and they devised a structure to save it, to bolt it together and put cables on it, and
Oh yeah.
it's still there.
Yeah, the cables. I forgot about the cables. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah. Well, it was a really nice talk. I
All
learned
right.
a lot of things. A lot of
Okay.
things I didn't know.
Yeah.
I, so where do I go to in Europe to climb the tallest tree? What was it, the eucalyptus?
In
In the end?
Portugal.
In
Portugal.
Portugal. Okay, okay.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
never been to Portugal, so I'll make
Yeah.
that happen.
Well, that's a good reason to go.
Yes, it is. It is. Yes.
You know,
Up till now, I did not have a reason to go to Portugal.
and that's kind of interesting because usually conifers are the tallest trees, but
Right.
eucalyptus are up there, and the tallest tree in Europe is the eucalyptus. So I hope so we lost some people.
Yeah, I think a few
Yeah,
perhaps.
I hope they didn't fall asleep. At least the Captain Monkey is still hanging in there, so I'm happy
Is
about that.
is Captain Monkey like behind you or on the side of you? What's on the side?
There he is. You see him there? He's
I don't
on the
know.
tree next to me.
Okay. I can see a hammock.
I was
Yeah.
a little bit, yeah, around. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, still here.
Okay.
Who was that? Was that Leo?
No, I don't think so.
Oh,
Leo sent me a lot of like nice videos today, but I'm not sure if we can share some. But yeah, I would have to download them first. But he should share them somewhere. Leo actually has been going up so he's in Brazil to do research now. So he's been going up and like he was showing me pictures of taking measurements at like the leaf level.
okay.
A little device. So, but he is doing that at like different heights, and so it was kind of funny because when he trained him in Panama, and then he went to Brazil, and I was like, oh my god, these trees are so much taller. Like, it's really hard to get to the top, kind of, to do this. Like,
They're
yeah.
taller in Brazil than in Panama.
Yeah, because at the field station in Panama, it's kind of a little bit like secondary forest. It's been degraded, so the tallest are like gone. But yeah, so yeah, they're just taller in Brazil, basically.
All right. Well, I think we're good for now. We're gonna go online 7 a.m. Pacific, 8 a.m. Colorado, 10 a.m. East Coast. Am I correct?
Oh my god! Like, there's too many. I told you, right, that I have a friend who thinks that you should just have like one time zone in the entire world.
We should. It's unscientific.
Right. And then for some people, when it's 12, it's dark or whatever, and for others at 3, it's dark. It doesn't matter. That's when the night starts, but just the same time zone.
No, I
Just
agree.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about daylight saving time, that doesn't make sense. There's no reason for it. That's just to just confuse people so they're late.
Right. I mean, yeah, and you guys still have that. Like in Argentina, they got rid of it. So so it's also, for me, that was confusing. Was like, wait, you guys are going, no, we got rid of it like 10 years ago, Briette. Okay, fine. Fine. So, but things are still going to be different between me and Colorado because Colorado's changing. So yeah. So yeah, tomorrow it is at 7. Wait, what? Oh, no, wait. So 10 a.m. Eastern time. So in New York, and then it's 8 in Colorado, Mountain Time, and then it's 7 on the coast where you are.
Okay, well, that's no problem because we are early birds. I'm especially an early bird.
Really?
And I'll tell you a joke about that. There's a bird goes into a bar and orders a tequila. This is a fancy Mexican tequila that has a worm in it.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
the bird looks at the bartender and goes, "Hey, there's supposed to be a worm in here." The bartender says, "Well, you should have come here early."
because the early bird, wait, what does it say? Bites the,
Early birds gets the worm.
oh yeah,
There you go. All right.
it's a really weird joke, but yes. True. Yeah, I forgot about the expensive tequila with the worm in it.
Oh
I
yeah.
forgot that that's a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, when I drink tequila, it's cheap, but yeah. Cool.
All
So
right.
okay. I will be here. I will not be as awake as you because I'm not an early bird, but I will be here. And
Okay.
and Vicky should be here. So I will like ask her again. But yeah, she said I asked her separately. She said yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, so that's good. And it's kind of open-ended. We'll keep it open as long as people want to talk.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll probably be on the ground. We're having coffee with my crew here.
Cool. Nice.
All right.
All
Okay.
right.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah. See you then.
See you. Bye-bye. Bye, guys. Bye, Captain Monkey.